So, so before I give my Devar Torah, let me just give a brief Cliff Notes version of the craziness which is Parsha Vayeitze. So after tricking his dying father and usurping his brother's blessing, Jacob runs off to the desert where he meets his cousin Rachel. He falls in love with Rachel, and Rachel's father, Lavan, says, if you work for me for 7 years, you can marry my daughter. Then he tricks Jacob into marrying his older daughter, Leah, who's apparently not as desirable. And then Lavan says, oh, sorry, did I do that? Well, anyway, you can marry Rachel in a week from now, but you still have to stay and work for me another 7 years, tending my sheep after that. And Jacob's like, sure, whatever. And then he marries Rachel a week later. And then Leah immediately starts becoming pregnant and providing offspring, which really upsets Rachel, who's not able to bear children at that time. So Rachel says, why don't you sleep with my handmaiden, in an attempt to counterbalance Leah's son's growing influence. And Jacob's like, okay. And he impregnates the handmaiden, and then they start having more children. And then Leah, not to be outdone by her little sister, says, oh, you can sleep with my handmaiden too. So Jacob says, sure, why not? He impregnates her also. And then finally, Rachel, his true love, becomes pregnant with his favorite son, Joseph. And we all know how that turns out. But that's not even all of it, because apparently Jacob decides it's time to head back to his homeland and face the music with his brother, who he's been feuding with. He tells Lavan, I'm taking my family, my 12 sons, my 1 daughter, my 2 wives, my 2 concubines, and I'm heading out. And Lavan says, well, you've been working for me for 14 years. You deserve something for your troubles. When you're ready to leave, you can take any of the sheep that have spots or are discolored in any way, and they can be yours. And then Lavan promptly tells his sons, hey, go take all the sheep that are discolored and hide them so Jacob can't find them when he leaves. And Jacob realizes what's going on, and he feeds these sheep some sort of magical, he finds the best sheep in Lavan's flock. He feeds them some sort of magical root. It's not really clear from the Torah. And all of the best sheep suddenly become discolored. And then it's time to leave, and Jacob says, well, I'm going to take my discolored sheep and my family, and he leaves. And he rounds up all of that, his whole household, and he heads out with his family, and then he goes out into the wilderness, and he sleeps with his head on a stone, and he has a dream about angels going up and down a ladder. And he wakes up and he says, God was in this place, and I didn't even know it. He pours some oil on the stone pillow, and he makes it into a monument. How's that for a crazy story? Harry Potter, Star Wars, Sopranos, Jersey Shore, they all got nothing on the Torah. For 6,000 years, we've been trying to decipher the messages from our Torah. What are the stories trying to tell us? The most learned scholarly rabbis have asked this question for millennia. They've studied the minutiae down to each letter and brushstroke. And now, here in the technology-infused world of 2021, we're supposed to find relevance in such crazy, irrelevant fairy tales. Well, actually, yes, we can. Reform Judaism, as it was explained to me by Rabbi Mark Strauss many years ago, is about studying the mitzvot and making informed decisions about how to incorporate them into your own life. Not because it's mandated by a higher authority, but because by studying and learning about the mitzvot, they take on personal meaning and therefore are not simply practiced as rote memorization. And of course, the study of Torah leads to them all. We as Jews should never stop studying, never stop learning about, never stop questioning Judaism. This is the way we keep Judaism relevant throughout the centuries. And how do we make this parsha relevant to our 21st century lives? We find the part that speaks to us now, in this moment. Next year, it'll be another part. But what part speaks to us now? For me, it's the statement, God was in this place and I did not know it. Over the past 2 years, as many of you know, my life has been rocked by not just this terrible pandemic, which has affected us all, but by the death of my parents as well. Of course, I was devastated by the loss, and I'll carry that loss with me for the rest of my life. But something else happened. I gained a new appreciation for life. We all know we're mortal, and we all know we'll die someday. But when I came face to face with the reality of death, in the most intimate way, it made me so much more aware of the miracle of life. As the world shut down for the pandemic, shortly after my mother passed, I found myself with more time to take long walks outdoors. The pace of life slowed down just as my shloshim, my 30 days of mourning, were coming to a close. It wasn't a conscious decision, but somehow I was suddenly more aware of all the miracles that make up our world. Every flower, every piece of bark, bumblebee, drop of dew, note of music, they all took on a new relevance in the miraculous cycle of creation. I didn't know it at the time, but my mother's death was the jolt, the awakening, the shofar blast that reminded me, we have only so many days, only so many seconds, only so many breaths on this earth. Of course, all of this information was there before, but I had not seen it. God was in this place, and I did not know it. I did not pour oil on my pillow and make an altar, but I did start taking longer walks and photographing nature. And more importantly, I started living a life of gratitude, grateful for every second, every day, every interaction with my loved ones. When I picture that stairway to heaven from Jacob's dream, it's not a straight up ladder. When I picture it, it's made up of two spiraling sides connected by rungs in the middle. It's a double helix, if you will. It's that miraculous DNA that defines us and everything we know. It reaches back in time to my parents and their parents, all the way to the beginning of the universe. And it spirals forward to infinity and heaven itself. What a miraculous ladder that is, connecting us to our loved ones in the past and the ones who have yet to be born. Could anything be more divinely inspired? That ladder is within us and outside us, surrounding us in every living thing we see, every person we love, and the vastness of the known universe. It goes to heaven and back 1,000,000 times a day. Jacob had to dream to see it, and I unfortunately had to experience a terrible loss to see it. But now that I know it's there, I hope I never forget it. If you look hard enough or pay attention to your dreams, I believe you can see it too. Because God is in this place and every other place you go, whether you know it or not. Not in a sing-songy, ambiguous childhood explanation kind of way, but in the most literal scientific sense imaginable. The molecular structure of our DNA, our own ladders to the star, is made up of the same stardust as every living thing on this planet. We borrow those atoms for a short time and then return them to the universe. My hope for myself, and anyone lucky enough to catch a glimpse of that ladder, is that it can never be unseen. I hope and I pray that I never forget. God is in this place, and now I know. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.